You're listening to the Night Demon Network. Go to nightdemon.net/subscriber to unlock more exclusive content.
Hello and welcome to the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast. I'm your host, Nesbitt. Today we're going to talk about a compilation. It's actually more than just a compilation. It's also a tribute to the lost art of making mixtapes. It was compiled by Night Demon, released in October of 2015. This is Heavy Metal Mixtape. So I'm a big fan of mixtapes. In my shed, I have an old stereo that plays cassette tapes, and I still have a stack of my old mixes from back in the day, and I listen to them on a regular basis. So in my shed, there's a beer fridge, a cassette player, an old VCR, and a stack of metal VHS tapes and cassettes. And, you know, it's basically a place where I can enjoy all my old obsolete technology. And I always hear these stories about people that, like, threw out their old tape collections, and it like totally breaks my heart. All of my tapes were in storage until I got the shed set up, and now they're kind of getting a second life. So when Night Demon released the Heavy Metal Mixtape, it was right up my alley. And once I got a copy, it was a permanent fixture in there for months. I thought it would make a great topic for a few podcast episodes. It's the first compilation and the second release on Night Demon's own record label. It's NDR002, which NDR001 being the first Night Demon EP. So it's the second release on Night Demon Records. And it's a great compilation, 21 tracks, 21 bands. It came out October 31st, that's Halloween of 2015, and it was limited to 666 hand-numbered copies. So I got my copy here, and this is number 375 of 666. So aside from just releasing a cool compilation, this was Night Demon's attempt to shine a light on the metal scene that they found themselves in. Here's Jarvis Leatherby.
The inspiration for putting Heavy Metal Mixtape together was the bands. I mean, it was the scene. It was the new wave of traditional heavy metal scene, which also spread out to, obviously, some classic bands who inspired it. When we started Night Demon, we went on the endless quest on the internet to search for other bands that were like us. Other bands that would become part of what would be known as the new wave of traditional heavy metal, which is basically categorized as younger next generation bands playing traditional heavy metal style. We did a lot of touring in the United States back then and through Europe, but in the US, really, I mean, metal is so underground that our best bet at getting a good gig in a town wasn't to find a booking agent to book us in the biggest venue. It was to hook up with the best metal bands in that area. And that's really how we discovered a lot of these bands. I mean, first we would discover them on the internet and then approach them through that. Or, you know, there were things that happened, like our first festival appearance in 2014 at the Ragnarocker Fest in Chicago. We met a lot of bands through that. There wasn't many U.S. metal festivals happening in the underground at the time. I mean, there still isn't, but that was a real big one for us, and we got to meet a lot of people through that. So here we are in 2015, after the release of our first full-length record, Curse of the Damned, and we are in the United States doing our first full-fledged North American headlining tour. I believe it was June of that year. We were in Louisville, Kentucky, and we had played with the band Savage Master. We'd become friends with those guys. And I think we had like almost a week off between shows. I remember it being at least a few days, 3 or 4 days. And it was, you know, if you've ever been to Kentucky in the summer, it's a pretty brutal place weather-wise. But these guys were cool enough to let us stay with them, and we didn't really have much to do. We were kind of just hanging out, and we were definitely road burned at the time. We had already done a big tour with Skullfist earlier at the start of that year, and then had gone to Europe for about 3 months. It was we were just crazy at the time, doing everything we could to stay on the road and play in front of as many people as we could. So at that time, we're staying at their house, and I remember kind of just not watching the paint dry, but we weren't very active in those days at, you know, making the most of our time and going to find fun things to do. I mean, really, we were just there to play and to tour, and when and where we could rest, we would. But I do remember us hanging out in their house, and I was playing guitar a little bit. They had a guitar. I remember I wrote the main riff to what would become Kill the Pain. So it's kind of funny, like 5 years later that becomes a song. But I remember I had a pretty healthy collection of metal tapes that I saved. I always saved my tapes for some reason. I love cassettes to this day, but there was a very long period of time where I stopped listening to them. But I'm glad I saved them because they really came in handy on tour. The main thing that happened was this Heavy Metal Mixtape, and we had a friend of ours. His name was Rob McNeese, and he was a guy from Houston, and he would give us these mixtapes on tour. He would mail them to me, or when we would travel through Texas, he would bring them to shows because all we had was a cassette player in our van.
And he gave us a whole box full of cassettes because our tour van in the States has a tape deck. That's how we found out about LaGriff, found out about a bunch of bands that way because of him giving us these mixtapes.
So Rob McNeese gives us these tapes, and I mean, they're just amazing. And he's DJing segments in between and kind of giving a little backstory on the bands, which was really cool for us because he turned us on to a lot of really, really great stuff. And it's always cool to hear old stuff that you never knew about because, you know, especially these days with the internet, you kind of think that you know everything or that you've heard everything that's out there and you know all the classics. And, you know, it's disappointing sometimes because you kind of have to look to the future and hope that something just as good or if not better is going to come along, because no matter how good something is from the past, it's just your ears and your mind gets burnt out on it after a while, after hearing it so many times. There's nothing like hearing something for the first time when it really grabs you and it's just like, oh man, it's just that total euphoric experience and can sometimes be life-changing, especially as a musician looking for inspiration. So we had these tapes, and I just got thinking about it because we were hanging out with the Savage Master guys, and I thought, man, wouldn't it be cool to release the Heavy Metal Mixtape? And at the time, we had re-released our first EP on a CD version, and we had just decided to start our own record company. I mean, it wasn't a record label meant to sign bands or anything like that. It was just for the sole purpose of re-releasing Night Demon material that we owned. And at the time, the only thing that we had the rights for that outright that we owned was still that debut EP. So Shadow Kingdom had sold out of the CD version, and we just decided to press the next run on our own. So we just kind of started this Night Demon Records. I mean, pretty self-explanatory, right? And I remember Brent had the idea to use the logo for Heavy Metal Records. So like Heavy Metal Records was a awesome record label way back in the day around the time of the new wave of British heavy metal, like them and Neat Records, Bronze. Well, really them and Neat Records kind of championed that scene and put out a lot of stuff and a lot of compilations as well. But so we kind of took the Heavy Metal Records logo, and Brent had a friend of his. She was a pretty good graphic designer, and she created the Heavy Metal Records logo with, instead of saying heavy metal, it said Night Demon. So, it's kind of weird. That just occurred to me. Night Demon and heavy metal have the same amount of letters in each word. That is so very fitting. So, so we just decided to do that. I actually contacted the owner of Heavy Metal Records, and we got his blessing to use that. And he actually did sell the label. I don't know who owns it now, but I mean, at the time he gave us the right to do that. So it was pretty cool. We made some stickers, and we do have it on a t-shirt design as well. But so I mean, that was kind of the thing. So when we were hanging out in Louisville with nothing to do for days, I got the idea of like, well, we have this record label. Let's put something else out. Obviously, we were a signed band as Night Demons, so any future releases or anything in the near future, we were not going to be releasing ourselves. So besides the EP, we really had nothing else to do as far as on the record label side. So we thought a compilation would be cool. And Heavy Metal Mixtape just came to my mind. So the idea of it at the time in 2015 was that the new wave of traditional heavy metal scene was just so underground, but there were so many great bands that I just really wanted to create a kind of a time capsule, just something that would cement this moment in time with what was happening with these bands. And so that was the main focus, and having a direct focus like that really helps a lot.
We already had, at this point, being that it was a couple years ago, we had good relationships with all the bands on the compilation. And that's just from us hitting the ground running when we got into the scene with Night Demon. I know Jarvis said that he wanted to really get to know everybody in the scene, and he really did. And, creating a good relationship with all these bands, and then coming to them with the idea of the mixtape and getting permission to put their songs on our tape was really cool. Our sound and the sound of the bands that we have on the mixtape are all pretty throwback, so it really made sense to showcase these bands on a tape like that.
I wasn't really looking to the past for the best songs, or I wasn't really looking to the future either and trying to commission bands to do original songs. A lot of compilations will do that, especially these days because of illegal downloading and streaming. It's a lot harder to sell a compilation. So most of them just come out for free unless the band is doing an exclusive, never before heard song that's exclusive to just that compilation. But I mean, as a listener, it's kind of cool to latch on to something like that. As somebody who's, as a record label, releasing the compilation, it's definitely cool because it's a hot selling point for them. I mean, because you can have X number of bands. I mean, especially on a cassette. I mean, I believe there's at least 20 songs on this thing. It's a 90-minute cassette. I mean, you have fans of 20 different bands coming in from all different areas to try and get this thing if the songs were exclusive. So I get the reasoning behind it. However, as a band, Night Demon, we never ever wanted to do that, and we still kind of don't want to do that. We've turned down many opportunities to do an exclusive track for a compilation or this or that. I mean, I think we would do it for a movie soundtrack if it was maybe the title track or like the lead song. I think that's an exception. That's something we would do. But just for a compilation, we just don't see the point. We want to be able to, when we write songs, to have them on our records. And have them cemented in time in a way that they're easily accessible, and you don't have to, you're not going to hear some Night Demon song and go, oh, what's that? I've never heard that before, and then go search our catalog and not be able to find it. So I know that's kind of not too exciting, but at the end of the day, I mean, that's just how we feel about it, and we didn't want to drag other bands through that. So we knew we were taking a risk as far as putting out a compilation of songs that were probably already out there, but we didn't see it that way at all. We didn't try and do this to make money. What we really wanted to do, again, was enshrine these bands in underground heavy metal history for the time period for the year of 2015.
I think it was brilliant to go about it and do it that way, and I think it worked out great. And the tape is in high demand as far as people wanting to get their hands on it, and that's a general appeal for it to begin with. So we wanted it to be something special. We wanted it to be a camaraderie thing with the other bands. I can say one thing about Night Demon and what we do, and we go out there to annihilate the stage and fuck shit up, but first and foremost, we love the camaraderie that we have with the other bands, and it's a definite team effort when it comes to, or group effort when it comes to really showcasing what we do and what the other bands do. So I think it's really cool that we did that, for sure.
So that's how this compilation came to be, but let's get into the tracks.
On October 31st, 2015, Night Demon released Heavy Metal Mixtape. This collection of underground heavy metal was released on 666 hand-numbered limited edition cassettes. It sold out in nearly a week. Since then, many people have scoured the internet and paid insane prices to get a copy of this tape. Now in 2021, it is near impossible to find a copy new or used of Heavy Metal Mixtape. Until now. Night Demon has opened the vault and released a handful of original factory-sealed heavy metal mixtapes. These are available for subscribers only. For those of you who are late to the game, head over to nightdemon.net/subscriber. Sign up and head over to the subscriber-only store to get your copy of Heavy Metal Mixtape while they still left.
So side A of the Heavy Metal Mixtape, track 1, Night Demon Screams in the Night. So this compilation is put together in 2015, and Night Demon has the Curse of the Damned album out at the time. And what better way to open a compilation than with the album opener Curse of the Damned? And since this is the first release on Night Demon Records, who better to open the compilation than Night Demon themselves? And not only a track, but kind of a taste of the full Night Demon experience.
The opening track of Heavy Metal Mixtape. Yes, of course. Come on. We had to put our band first, right? No, honestly, part of this thing was to make it a real mixtape is to just add cool segments in between breaks in certain sets. So, traditionally on mixtapes, people would throw in little comedy bits or just samples from things just to kind of take you out of just song after song after song. It's a full program of entertainment is what it is. So to start off the tape, we kicked it off with Riddle of Steel, which is the Night Demon intro. It's our live intro. And, most people know that from the Conan movie soundtrack, but our fans really know it from our shows. we thought, well, how appropriate is that? Because at the time, we were kicking off all of our shows with Screams in the Night. So the Riddle of Steel intro would play, then Screams in the Night would come right in. That was our first song. It's also the first track off of the album Curse of the Damned that we were touring off at the time. So for us, it was great. It was just like, it was the same old story, right? What are we doing every night? Especially in 2015, we're touring the world, playing that intro right into Screams in the Night. So that's how we kicked it off. I'm positive we'll do a full episode or many on the song Screams in the Night in the future, so I don't need to get into that right now. The goal here is really to talk about the other tracks and the other bands on here and expose them and what they're doing to the Night Demon heavy metal faithful.
So here on the Heavy Metal Mixtape, they open with Riddle of Steel straight into Screams in the Night, which is already proven to be a great album opener and also makes a great opener for this compilation. So track number 1 on the Heavy Metal Mixtape, Night Demon Screams in the Night. So part of making a really good mixtape too is having a good opening 1-2 combo. So I always think you should kick off a mix with 2 solid tracks. And track number 2 on this compilation is also killer. It is Riot Metal Warrior. All right, Riot. A lot of you will already be familiar with Riot, their legendary heavy metal band. If you don't know Riot, you might recognize their baby seal mascot. Or you might know their song Road Racin', which was covered by Night Demon. It was a staple of their live set for a long while, and it was a bonus track on certain versions of Curse of the Damned, Road Racing. Yeah, so Riot, covered by Night Demon, very influential band for Night Demon. I'm not going to get into the complete Riot story here. That could be a multiple episode arc of the podcast if we did. But the band goes back to 1975. They've had over 20 members, so I'll keep it kind of brief here. Basically formed by Mark Reale, the driving force behind Riot. They're named after actually a quote from The Honeymooners, where Ralph used to call Alice a riot. I heard that in an interview. I thought that was kind of funny. They formed as a metal band in New York in 1975. So, during peak disco and peak punk rock, this kick-ass metal band forms. I'm only really, really familiar with the first 3 albums, and they are like beginning to end classics. I can't recommend them enough. That's Rock City in 77, Narita in 79, and Fire Down Under in 1981, which is, I think, my personal favorite, which almost didn't get released. And I hear nothing but good things about the albums after that, too. I like what I've heard from the other albums. It's weird with Spotify and streaming services. You discover a band, and it can be kind of overwhelming when they have a big discography. So I'm definitely going to go check out the rest of the albums and really dig into them a bit deeper. And that's one great thing about a compilation, is I had no idea until this compilation what the newer Riot was like. And I heard this track, and I checked out the newest stuff, and it sounds great. So there's a lot of amazing Riot music to discover. If you're like me and you only know certain albums, do yourself a favor and check out some of the newer stuff. It's awesome. Anyway, back to Riot. So partly a victim of a war with the record company, Capitol Records, they broke up in 84 after releasing 5 really solid metal albums. And after a brief period, Mark Reale reformed Riot again with bass player Don Van Stavern in 1986. So Riot has a long and complicated history with a bunch of lineup changes. I'll let someone who was there tell it. Here's Riot bass player and songwriter Don Van Stavern.
Greetings, metal warriors. This is DVS Don Van Stavern from Riot and the continuing ventures of the 5th chapter of the band Riot, but it's all Riot to me, baby. I actually joined the band in 1984, although I knew Mark in the early 80s when they were going from the Guy Speranza, Rhett Forster transition. Mark would come to Texas, where I lived at the time, to visit a mutual friend who was a street team member for the label at the time. So Mark wanted to keep his chops up, so Ricky introduced him to Slayer, the Texas Slayer. I was the bass player at the time. We would jam some songs, and eventually we had a writing relationship, and Mark would demo stuff for Riot, Born in America in particular, where I wrote a few songs on there with him, and take it up east, where the band was based at the time. Well, our writing relationship turned into Mark wanting to do a solo record, which eventually became the band Narita, and we recorded demos, and a lot of them ended up on Thunderstill. We shopped to no avail, and during that hiatus from Born in America, Sandy Slavin would call Mark about getting the band back together. So Mark kind of put his solo thing on hiatus and moved out west, where Sandy had relocated to continue the band. Bassist Kip Lemming, who was on 3 records, decided he didn't want to continue, so they gave me a phone call. And not only was I Mark's friend, but I was a big fan of Riot as well. So I headed out west, and I moved in with Sandy Slavin and his wife Mimi in Burbank, who was handling the affairs for the band along with their friend Gina Zamparelli, who was a booking staple in the Hollywood scene. So when we got down there, Rhett Forster couldn't make it at the time because he was doing his solo stuff. So we had a couple singers, and then I went through my vinyl collection and recruited the Tyrant from the Ample Destruction Jag Panzer album. Harry Conklin flew in and did some shows with us. Eventually, Rhett came back aboard, flew in, and stayed at Sandy's as well, and then we ended up getting our own place on the Strip in Hollywood. And we played some shows and shopped some demos. Sign of the Crimson Storm with Rhett's voice on it, which ended up appearing on Thunderstill years later, to no avail. So we wanted to move back east and see what our luck would be. So Mark called up the old management that produced all the records and managed the band since Rock City. And so we headed east. Sandy didn't want to move because he was married and lived on the West Coast and didn't actually like the power metal direction we were going in. Rhett thought he'd give it a shot. And so he came with us, although he felt like his voice wouldn't fit. And eventually he ended up doing some other solo stuff. So once we got up east to New York, we had the task of finding another drummer and another singer. So studio engineer Dave found Tony Moore, who was doing some session work there. He ended up having a Golding voice and was hired. And then I went through my vinyl collection again and found Mark Edwards, who was on the Steeler record with Yngwie. So Mark Edwards played on Half Thunderstill. A lot of people don't know. He had a commitment with the band Lion, so I had to find a drummer. My guitarist from the Texas Slayer, Ronnie Jarzambek's brother Bobby, was phenomenal. So he ended up flying up, and we recorded the rest of the record and ended up getting a deal with CBS Records and recorded for them and made videos and ended up doing The Privilege of Power. So that was my years with Riot, and then I decided to take a hiatus. I didn't like the direction of the band and some of the management decisions. So I took a break for a while, and they continued on. Then a little before 2008, Mark and Bobby called me and said when they're traveling with their bands, I think Mark was doing another version of Riot and Bobby was with Halford and Sebastian Bach, some of the meet and greets and fans they would talk to wanted a reformation of Thunderstill. So they called me, and we ended up getting everybody on board, had a meeting, and decided to start recording demos and shopping. And we got a deal right away and recorded the album Immortal Soul. It was the comeback Thunderstill lineup record. Came out to rave reviews. A lot of people liked it. And, of course, with all Riot's drama and tragedy, guitarist Mark Reale was going through health problems with the Crohn's disease at the time. He was living with me in Texas when we moved back, and I would take him to the hospital a lot. And he was taking medication, and he couldn't do a lot of things. We released the record and did some shows, but he couldn't do them with us, so we did them 4-piece, including the 70,000 Tons of Metal we ended up doing, and he said he'd join us when we got back. Because of health reasons, he couldn't travel. So, of course, we got the dreaded phone call from his father saying that Mark had passed, so it was a gut punch, and pretty much that was it for us.
So Riot forms 75 and releases a series of albums over the years up until 2012 when Mark Reale passes away, the founder of the band. Here's Jarvis.
I will say that before the EP came out, so before Night Demon ever released any music, we had sent the digital tracks over to Mark Reale, who was the founding member of Riot and the guy who was he was the only guy who was in the band from beginning to end. And I can't remember how I got his email address, but we ended up just sending him a message saying, hey, we're really big fans and you've totally inspired this band, and thanks for the inspiration. Hope you like what you hear. And he never replied back. And I remember I was working at my job at the time, the job that was basically killing me and kind of forced me to take Night Demon seriously and take music seriously again. I think I remember on my computer, I read an article on Blabbermouth or something that he had passed away. And I was just crushed by it. I mean, it was terrible to hear that, you know? And I think the article said something that they didn't report the news that he had died for a few months after. And so they had mentioned the date that he passed away. And I looked back through my email messages, and sure enough, we sent that to him. We sent him the Night Demon EP the day that he passed away. And I kind of took that as just kind of a sign from beyond the grave, a sign from above, a sign that Night Demon had to be here to carry that torch, to carry the spirit of Mark Reale and Riot in some way. We had to be a part of that moving forward. And it's these kind of serendipitous things happen a lot in my life, and they happen a lot in the career of Night Demon. And when they do, they're not taken lightly. We don't ignore these things. We use them for fuel and for inspiration for our greater purpose.
So kind of a crazy story, sad story. Anyway, after that, Don Van Stavern decides to keep the Riot spirit alive by relaunching the band. So he retired the Riot name and relaunched the band as Riot V with Todd Michael Hall as the lead singer, because he was the fifth singer, so thus the Roman numeral 5 in the name. So Riot, the spirit of Riot, continues as Riot V.
So after that, we kind of went our own way, and I kept writing music because I, write a majority of the music for Riot. And I would talk to Mike about it, and he was really not into it at the time. So I just kept writing songs, and I said, let's see what we can do. Tony couldn't do it anymore, and Bobby had obligations with a million bands. So I went to some friends, and a friend of mine in Europe, Bart, turned me on to Todd, and I got him to sing on the demos. And the label, who we were contractually bound with for another record, loved the stuff. And we ended up finding a drummer, which was Frankie, who was on Army of One. And then we got Nick, who was one of Mike's students turned teachers at his guitar school in New York. So the band was back, and we released Unleash the Fire. And, we thought it was going to be, skeptical because of the name. And so in some markets, we added a V for the fifth chapter. And some markets didn't want to use it overseas. But everybody loved the record, and we continued on. And Mr. Reale loved it. And so with his blessing, we started playing festivals and touring, and ended up signing to the next label, Nuclear Blast, and put out Armor of Light. And so far, so good.
So there's a brief history of Riot and how the lineup that's on this compilation came to be. It's funny, the more I listen to Riot, the more I realize they should be way bigger. They should be a household name. The fact that Quiet Riot is more well-known than Riot is kind of a travesty to metal. But they're one of those bands that just had bad luck and bad deals over the years. Anyway, so Riot, huge influence on Night Demon. Like I mentioned, Night Demon covered road racing in their live set, but there's a lot of love for this band in the Night Demon camp.
The Riot 5 track, this was the second track here on the record, and I'll just say personally, this is probably my favorite song on it. There's so much to say about Riot. They were really a big influential band on the origins of Night Demon, especially the Guy Speranza era. The first few records, from Rock City to Narita to Fire Down Under, those, again, I'm tongue-tied. Riot is one of the greatest bands of all time, one of the greatest heavy metal hard rock bands of all time. Many people call them an honorary new wave of British heavy metal band. They never really got much traction in the States. They have a very long history of maybe reasons why that did not happen. There's been books written about it. There's blogs and articles you can find. So I'm not going to get into that. I wasn't there.
Yeah, so I mentioned that I only really know the first few albums from the 80s. After hearing this song, the one on the Heavy Metal Mixtape, I checked out the album that this track is from, and it's from, so Metal Warrior is the track, and it's from Unleash the Fire, which came out in 2014. And it's a totally amazing album, totally worth checking out for sure. Their sound changed a bit from those early days to more of a power metal feel. They have another album out since then, 2018, Armor of Light was released. Also a very solid album. Everyone and the dog has Spotify or some sort of streaming service nowadays, so there's no excuse. Go check these albums out. You won't be disappointed. So Night Demon was influenced by Riot, played on a few bills with Riot. This song made a huge impression on them. And here's Jarvis with the story of how this song ended up on the compilation.
When we played our first festival appearance, which was April of 2014, we flew to Chicago for the Ragnarocker Metal Apocalypse, which took place at Reggie's. It was 2 nights at Reggie's in Chicago, and it was amazing. For us, we were extremely excited. It was our first time going anywhere to play, out of the region. I mean, we actually had gone to play in Las Vegas with Diamond Head prior to that, with Diamond Head and Raven. So we had been out of the state, but nothing like this. And we were getting ready to go to Europe shortly after that, but this was kind of the first thing stateside, and we were super stoked. And Riot was one of the headliners for one of those nights. And I mean, we just couldn't believe it. We're like, Riot, are you kidding me? Like, this is fucking incredible. And so they had reformed. Well, not reformed, but they had basically, after Mark passed away, they decided to keep the band going, and they called themselves Riot V. And they had gotten this new singer, Todd Michael Hall. So the day we got there, we were playing the same night as them on the festival, and we got to see them sound check. And God, they just sounded so amazing. But I mean, without getting into a big long story about it, they played an original song that night, like a new original, to quote Spinal Tap, and it was called Metal Warrior. And I mean, I just remember us guys in the band just looking at each other and going, this is fucking incredible. I mean, these guys are carrying on, not an original member left in the band, but carrying on the spirit, definitely the power metal era of Riot that started around the Thundersteel album. But it just sounded so good. And this song was so fucking incredible. It had everything you wanted in a metal song. And so this had to be on the compilation. At the time, Night Demon was signed to SPV Steamhammer Records in Germany, legendary metal label. And Riot had put out their album. Riot 5 had put out their first record, and this song was on it. So immediately I contacted Ollie Hahn over at SPV, who was our A&R guy, who's the main guy. And, I didn't even go through the band. I just said, hey, we're putting together this compilation. Can I license this track? And he's like, yeah, totally cool. Just use it and just send us some tapes because we're big fans. We just want some copies of the tapes. And that's what we did. We filled out some paperwork, and it was as easy as that. Fucking Metal Warrior.
Man, I love this track. If you enjoyed it, be sure to check out Riot's latest stuff. It's all pretty great. Night Demon has shared stages with Riot a few times since this album was put together, since this compilation was put together. And it's pretty cool to have him on the compilation, on the mixtape. Especially such a great song with killer riffs, really powerful vocals. And here's current Riot singer Todd Michael Hall.
My name is Todd Michael Hall, and I sing for the band Riot V. We use a Roman numeral for the 5, so people that don't know us might think it looks like Riot V. People that do know us usually refer to us as Riot because we are a continuation of the band Riot that released its first album in 1977. I am the 5th singer to record original music and release an album in the history of the band, and that's where the 5 comes from in the name. It represents the 5th chapter of Riot. I really like the idea of heavy metal compilations because it reminds me of the mixtapes from the days of old. You know, and while it's difficult to condense a band down to one song, a compilation like this is a great way to get exposure to a lot of different bands. The Riot 5 song on the heavy metal compilation is called Metal Warrior, and it's a great song because it's really representative of the power metal side of Riot. It has special connection for me too because it was the first original song that I recorded when I was auditioning for the band, and so in a way it helped me get in the band. It's also special because way back in 1988, on the classic Thundersteel album, there was a song called Johnny's Back. And so Metal Warrior is actually a song about Johnny, kind of a continuation of the Johnny saga, if you will.
I think heavy metal compilations are cool. I mean, if you dig a band, you can go get their record and hear a dozen of their songs. A compilation lets you hear a dozen bands with a dozen different songs. And if you dig it, you can go out and get their full release. I remember growing up on Deep Purple and Judas Priest, but new bands I could hear on these compilations, like the Soundhouse tapes and Metal for Mothers, introduced me to the likes of Iron Maiden, Angel Witch, Samson, Raven, a lot of new wave of British heavy metal bands that influenced me in my writing. Riot's been on a lot of compilations, and there have been a lot of Riot compilations.
So speaking of Riot compilations, Night Demon's cover of Road Racing was actually featured on the various artists' tribute to Riot Thunder and Steel Down Under. It was released in 2015. Yeah, so if you're one of the people that is not very familiar with Riot, I would recommend checking them out. Their early stuff is great. Their new stuff is great too. If you're sort of familiar with them like I am, I would say start diving into the later stuff. It's really great. This song will really give you a good taste of Riot's current sound. They also have a Live in Japan 2018 album on Spotify, which I've been listening to quite a bit this week. I think they have a purple triple vinyl version, which I think I actually might buy. Anyway, check them out. AreYouReadyToRiot.com is the website. And they have track number 2 on the Heavy Metal Mixtape. One more time, here's Don Van Stavern, bassist and songwriter for Riot.
Everything's been going great for the band. It's an upward spiral. With all the drama and tragedy that has happened with the band, I'm glad that we can continue on with the legacy of it and the fallen members and the current members. So Riot is like one big musical family, and so we live on. And here we are, ready to hit the road again once the lockdown's lifted. Anyway, so we need to start a riot. Shine on.
So that's it for this episode of the podcast and the Heavy Metal Mixtape. You can listen to the entire tracks from the mixtape in the subscriber section on nightdemon.net. I also have word that there is a very, very limited number of these physical heavy metal mixtape cassettes that were held in the Night Demon archives. They'll be available only in subscriber store. So they're super limited and in demand. If you want one, the subscriber store is your last chance to get your hands on one. I know I always talk about the subscribers section at the end of these episodes, but it really is worth checking out. There's tons of content in there. Unreleased Night Demon tracks, posters, photos, unreleased artwork, video and audio of live shows, It's the story of Night Demon in detail, and yeah, it's all available at nightdemon.net. So until next time, this is Nesbitt signing off.
Thanks for listening to the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast. Head over to nightdemon.net, click on the subscriber tab, and sign up to access exclusive weekly bonus content. If you would like to donate to support the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast, you can do so through PayPal at paypal.me/nightdemonmetal. Additionally, if you have not already done so, please subscribe, like, rate, and review the show on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts.
All hail, Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast listeners. This is Dusty Squires chiming in to tell you about my brand new signature sticks from the London Drumstick Company. I've dreamt of having my very own drumsticks ever since I was a wee lad, and LDC made that a possibility for me. Founded in 2016 in London, England, the birthplace of heavy metal, the London Drumstick Company has trailblazed a path through the music industry and taken the drummer world by storm. When I met them for the first time, they knew their product was going to withstand the beatings of a Night Demon show. They took the time to work with me on getting everything just right. The balance and weight of my sticks are the same no matter what, and the durability is bar none the best I've ever had. I know my sticks will last through the set night after night. I'm truly honored to work with a company that caters to their players the way LDC does. Their innovation and attention to detail is what separates them from the rest of the stick makers out there. Their custom stick sleeves are unbelievable and really make the entire presentation complete. Wait until you see the design they came up with for me. It blew my mind and was a surprise to say the least. They have all kinds of amazing swag, including hoodies, t-shirts, drummer shorts, drum keys, stick bags, towels, face masks, practice pads, and much, much more. Even if you're not a drummer, you can be a part of Demon history and order my brand new signature sticks direct from their website. How cool is that? And to top it off, the London Drumstick Company are giving an exclusive offer to the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast listeners. Go to londondrumsticks.co.uk and receive a 15% store-wide discount using promo code DEMONSTICKS. All capital letters, no spaces, Demon Sticks. DEMONSTICKS. I can't thank everyone there enough for the opportunity to be a part of their family and for them trusting me with their amazing products. See you metal maniacs on the road very soon. And yes, the wood chips will be flying.
Greetings, boils and ghouls. This is your comrade, the Crypt Keeper here, reporting dead from the sanctuary of the strange. Tonight's macabre myth is a fright-filled feature, one overflowing with monsters, madness, and magic.
Visit our website at monstersmadnessandmagic.com to stay up to date on all the dark dealings within the sanctuary of the strange. Enjoy the show.
Hey Metalheads, I'm Mark and I host the Metal Forge. Let me tell you about the show. The Metal Forge features the best underground metal from all over the world. We spend every week with a different artist with interviews, in-depth conversations, and most of all, the music. We also feature audience interactivity where you can submit your questions to the upcoming guests. New episodes are out every Friday at noon Eastern Time at metalforgeradio.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking Podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
Okay, metalheads, you've been complaining that there has not been a channel that plays all of the heavy metal videos from past, present, and future for years and years at this point. Well, that time is over. Heavy Metal Television is back. HeavyMetalTelevision.net is the website. Go there. You can see videos playing 24/7, 365, all the time, all the best from the old school, the new school, and everything in between. Check it out, HeavyMetalTelevision.net. It is where the metal is.